Hello and welcome back to Java Basics. Last video we worked through a number of exercises and we put them all in our main method, and at the end of the video I explained that the main method is getting a bit clustered, a bit cluttered, and there is something that we can do to make it more efficient. To make our code more efficient, we're going to introduce methods. We've already got one method, this main method here. Our methods are going to look similar but not exactly the same. To create our first method, I'm going to add some space between our class, the top of our class, and our main method. And I'm going to type in public static void, and I'm going to call this method print number. We're going to use open and close parentheses, which are the shift 9 and 0, and then I'm going to open a curly brace and press enter, and by pressing enter it enters the closed curly brace for us. So here we've got output a number. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to select that line and use Control and X on my keyboard to cut it, and then Control and V to paste it. But there's a few things wrong. I've called this one output a number and I've written print number, so we're going to correct that first. So I'm going to click on print number, and on my keyboard I'm going to press Control and R, and it's going to bring up this rename method. So I'm just going to delete print and I'm going to write output. There we go, and press enter, and that's changed it for us. That's the correct way to rename something in Java. So now the note matches the method name, that's good, but we have an error on my line 9, and it's an error from num1. And you'll probably notice that I have an error. If I hover over the error, it will say cannot find variable num1. And we know that num1 is just here on line 14. But a variable can only be seen within a method. So we've got this method here, and we've got another method which is our main method. Now because we've declared the variable num1 in our main method, that means that we can't see it in our output number method. And every time we create a method, that's going to be true for number 1, number 2, 3 and largest. So what we really need is some way to be able to access them from anywhere within this class, within this file. What we can do is go to our public class, press enter again for a new line, and we're going to copy, or cut, sorry, these variables and paste them up here on line 6. And just to make sure they work, we're going to write the keyword static in front of them, and we will look at keywords but not for a while. So I'm going to put the keyword static in front, and you'll notice they've gone purple. The purple means that the variables are accessible anywhere within our current class Java tutorial. Okay, so that is one method. That's nice and simple, nice and straightforward. So if we tidy up our main and we run it, so it actually hasn't printed number 1. It started on line 16 saying number 1 is 7. We need to add in a bit of code into our main that tells NetBeans to find this method. So what we're going to do is something called a method call, or we're going to call the method. So we're going to write output number with open and close parentheses and a semicolon. If I run that this time, you'll see that it prints out 7 first. So what's happening is when we press run, our interpreter is coming in to find our main, and then it's finding output number as a method. So then it's jumping to this method, it's reading this line here, ignoring this line because it's just a comment, reading this line, and then when it gets here it's going to jump back down to this section. So what I'm going to do this now, I'm going to write another method, and we're going to call public static Now I'm going to write another method for format output, and we are going to see what happens with the method call. So we've got public, static and void, format, output, open and close parentheses, open curly brace, press enter, and I'm going to cut this code, so using Control and X, and paste it into that method. And then same as before, we need to do a method call. So we need to do format, output, open and close parentheses and a semicolon. And now that will run the code. So if I press play, you can see that it's printed the number 7 from this method, and you can see that the next part of code that is printed is saying that the value of number 1 is 7, which is what we expect from this section here. If I change the order of the methods, it will print them out in the order defined here. So if I press play now, it's going to run this method first, format output, and then it's going to run output number. Then it's going to run the output number. So number 1 is 7, and then it prints 7. Okay. Consequently, the reason I'm having to close this is because the code is running successfully, but because it's expecting user input, it's not running through correctly because we're not. It's not running through to the end of the program because it's waiting for the user to input something. So that's why I'm having to press the close window button here. I'm going to quickly do the rest of these methods, and then we can have a look at some more information about methods. Right, so I've added in all of the methods, and you can see that I've got an error in my method here, the user input largest number. And the error is with our scanner. And some of you may have noticed that when I created the user input method, that I actually put the scanner inside that method, which means that it's only accessible within the scope of this method. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it out of the user input method. I'm going to go to the top where our static ints are. I'm going to create a static scanner. And because we've added that scanner in up here now, it's accessible throughout our class, which means it's gone purple and the errors have gone. I am going to tidy this up a little bit. I'm going to add some comments on to say start of each method and end of each method, just so hopefully you can clearly see what's what, and then we'll start working with our main, and I'll show you some different ways of calling these methods. Okay, so I've added my notes in, and you can see that our main method is looking quite a lot tidier now. The only thing is that we need to now put in a call to all of our methods. If you look here on the left, you can see we've got these red icons. Each of these red icons signifies or represents a method that we've written. So we've even got the main here, we've got format output there, and we have got output number as well. So we're missing a few others, so I'm going to quickly add all of these in. Okay, so I've added all of these method calls in, and I'm going to put some notes on. So we'll run method format output. So each of these methods will be ran. So if I want to run the first 3, I'm going to comment out these last 4. In fact, I'm going to comment out the 2 user input ones because they take a bit longer. So all I did there was selected the line and pressed Control and / on my keyboard, and that will comment out those lines for you. And the / is next to the full stop. Okay. So if I press play now, it's going to run all 5 of these methods. There we go. So if I make that a bit larger, so there we go, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So each of our methods, coincidentally, has 1 line of output, so that's great. But if you think back to the Windows operating system, you can't have every method called from your main. It just wouldn't work, it wouldn't make sense either. So there are different ways that we can call methods. We could start by calling the method format output. So what we can do is go to our format output method by pressing Control on our keyboard and then left clicking on it with the mouse, and it has taken us to that method. So when someone has completed the format output method, maybe we want to then for them to run the output number method. So all we do is then put a call in to output number. So if we run that now, you can see it's ran the format output method first, then it's ran the number 7 one, which is the output number. So after output number, we want to run adding numbers. So let's do adding numbers. So we're calling our method call. I should put some more notes in, shouldn't I? It would be quite helpful probably. So this is a method call. Okay. So what I'm expecting to happen now is for our interpreter to find the main Java class, the main Java method, run that, find format output, run these 2 lines, see that we've got another call here, jump to that method, which is just here, run this line, find this method here, run that method, and then stop. So if I press play, we should get 3 lines of code. Perfect. So number 1 is 7, which is this, then the number 7, which is this one, and then the total of numbers is this one. I wonder what would happen if we do add 3 numbers like this. If we call 2 of the methods almost at the same time, well, nothing really will happen, because what's happening is that the code is being ran procedurally, which means it's going from top to bottom. So as soon as it finds this adding numbers method, it jumps down to this method block here, reads or ignores that line of code, runs this line of code, sees this curly brace and realizes that it's finished here. Because it hasn't reached the curly brace for this method, it jumps back to this method, sees there's another method call, so jumps down here, ignores that line, runs that line, sees the closed curly brace, so knows that this bit is finished, goes back to this method and sees that curly brace is finished, so then goes back to the main to see if there's anything else to run, and then finishes. So just to prove that, I'm going to put a system.out.print that says finished. And then if we run this, so this is our first method, linking to our second, linking to our third and fourth, and then finally the code has been finished running. So there are lots and lots of different ways that we can link methods together. So if I just pop back up here, what I'm going to do is remove these method calls. I'm going to remove this one, put my curly brace back there. That's great. Okay, so now I'm going to comment out this line using Control and /, and I am going to uncomment this last line here, which is the user input one with 3 numbers. So say for example if we check for a condition and that condition is true, we want a specific method to be ran. So let's say if num1 is largest, so if that's true, we want format output to run. If largest is equal to num2, we want output number to run. And if that one's the largest, we'll say add 3 numbers. Can run like that. Okay, so what I'm expecting to happen, just comment this out, otherwise it'll say finished, is for this method to run, which is all of this code here. We're going to be asked to enter 3 numbers. If the largest number is 1, it's going to store the largest number here. It's going to run that method. Then it's going to print out largest is whichever the largest is. If the largest is number 2, it's going to store number 2 and largest, run that method, then print out largest is number 2, and then same for the third one, but with this method. Okay? And then I'm just going to uncomment that finished actually, and I'm just going to put it at the bottom. Like so. And then if we give that a run, so instead of using the play button all the time, you can just press F6 on your keyboard. So enter your first number, 22, enter your second number, 43, enter your third number, 56. So the sum of the 3 numbers is 121, the largest is 56. So what that's done is ran the first method from our if, so it's ran format output, then it's printed out the largest, then it's printed finished. So we don't have to use an if just with numbers. We can use it with strings, which are words. We can use it with single characters like Y and N for yes or no, and you can use it for all sorts of different things. So what we can look at next is perhaps making a slightly more complex user input, and depending on the user's selection, we'll run a different method. And we're going to write that at the top here. So I'm going to enter some new space in, some new lines. I'm going to say public, static and void like we have before, and I'm going to call it user question, open and close parentheses which are shift and 9 and 0, open and close curly braces, and the first thing we need to do is prompt the user. We need to tell the user what to do. Instead of typing system.out.println every time, which does get a bit tricky, I'm going to write in lowercase S-O-U-T, S-out, and then press tab on my keyboard, and it prints out system.out.println. Perfect. So we're going to ask the user which method they want to run. Okay, so we're going to say, which method would you like to run? We're going to prompt the user to choose a method they would like to run. So please enter method number. So I'm going to say, please select from the following. And we can write lots of system outs, and they will display one line at a time. Or we can add in a carriage return. And all we need to do for that is at the end of our line put a \n for a new line, and then on the next line down we just put a plus in to concatenate, if you remember from last week, and double quotes. So we can say 1, or in fact if we're doing letters and words, let's say A. We'll use the methods that we've already created. Output a number. So this isn't the actual method call, this is us just displaying a sort of menu to our users. So press enter again, and then we can say B, format output, and then we'll do one more. So, and then the last one can be C, user input. Okay, so I want to test this to make sure it's running correctly. So I'm going to go down to our main, and to do that quickly I'm just going to select here on the left, double click main, and there you go, it's taken us straight down there. I am going to delete that line because I don't think we need that any longer. Comment that line out. Actually, let's get rid of that line as well. And I'm going to put in a call to methods. So the call is the method name. So that's user method. Sorry, it's not, it's user question. Open and close, parentheses, and a semicolon. So I've commented all of these out because we don't need to see them. We've tested them, we know they work. So let's have a look. So please select a number from the following. So it's kind of done what I wanted, but not quite. So let's go back up to the top. I need to add in the new lines. So the backslash is an escape character, and that means that whatever comes after the backslash needs to be interpreted slightly different. So we can use N for a new line, T for a tab space, and R for a carriage return. And there we go. So we've run that this time, and that looks much better. So I'm happy with that, and I'm now more confident about moving on to the next section. So I'm happy with the menu. What we're going to do now is that we've prompted the user for an input. We need to take their input and store it. So we need a variable. I'm going to create it in the methods scope. So in this method, I'm not going to create it in the class. And I'm going to say, I'm not going to say string. I'm going to do char. Char is a single character. And we're going to call it user input. And we are going to not assign it a value just now. So we prompted our user, and we're going to say user input is equal to the scanner dot next char. So next char isn't recognized. So what we're going to do is find out why. So I've got Google here. I'm just going to make this a bit smaller. So I'm going to type in Java scanner next char. I mean, that's pretty freaky that I knew that. Let's have a look. So Geek for Geeks. I use Geeks for Geeks regularly on a weekly basis, so I trust them. So let's see. This program is to read a character using a scanner. So the scanner class in Java supports next int, next long, next double, but there is no next char. Okay, so to read a char, we use next and then char at 0. That's fine. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Never knew that. Every day is a learning day. So what we're going to do is get rid of char here, and then we're going to leave it as next, and then dot char at, and then an index number, and we're going to say 0 because we want the first character to be returned. Sometimes I think it's quite reassuring to know that even people that have coded Java for a number of years still don't know everything. So that's why I will be putting sort of little bits of research in here as well. Right, so back to this. So we've got our menu system, we've got our user's input being stored in our variable user input. What we need to do now, actually I'm just going to add one more bit on the end here. Please enter A, B or C, just to make it clear. So now we are going to write our if statement. So if user input is equal, so I put a double equals in there, to single quotes A. The single quotes are the @ symbol on your keyboard. If user input is equal to the first option, A, we're going to run the method output number, And last time we used an else and an if. This time we're going to use an else if. An else if allows us to enter another condition. So I'll show you what I mean. So we're going to open more parentheses. So I enter my double parentheses, and now I'm going to say else if user input is equal to B. We're going to run format output. And I'm going to do another else if for the final option. So user input is equal to C. Open our curly braces. Just a reminder, the curly braces are next to the letter P. So they're the square braces, and you hold down shift to get them. So if it's C, we need to run user input. And if it doesn't match any of those inputs, we're going to have a default. We're just going to say, I don't understand, or I do not understand your selection. Okay, so let's have a run of that and see what happens. So please select a number from the following. Please enter A, B, or C. So A ran, output a number. That's great. I run it again using F6 on my keyboard. Enter B. Perfect. And let's see what happens if we enter C. Enter a number. So it's asking for the perfect. That's absolutely exactly what I expected to happen. I wonder what will happen if we enter. Let's try entering D. Okay, so again, it's sort of done what we expected it to do. So if it doesn't meet any of these three options, it will print out this for anything else that isn't an A, a B, or a C, and then say, I do not understand your selection. So that's great. But I wonder what will happen if we enter a capital A. Right, so it's comparing the user input to a lowercase a. So I wonder what we can do to ignore the case. So what we will be able to do is use a pre-built function called ignore uppercase. So what we can do is change our user's input to lowercase. So if I enter a capital A now, the value that we've stored in user input has been changed to lowercase. So we can enter capital A's, capital B's, it doesn't matter. It's going to change the case for us. There we go. So it's still running as we would expect. Thank you for watching. I hope this has made sense to you and helped you in your programming journey. If you do have any questions, please leave a comment below,